SafeWork New South Wales is investigating a top Sydney hospitality group after the Sydney Morning Herald this week published a series of reports detailing allegations about mismanagement, drug use and sexual abuse. One of the key allegations in the sex, sleaze and hospitality investigation is that female staff at the Swillhouse group were pushed out of the business after they reported sexual assaults.
Now, the Swillhouse group, which runs several high-profile bars and restaurants in Sydney CBD, has since issued a statement saying it sincerely apologises to anyone who has felt hurt, unsafe, unprotected, triggered or unheard, and that it acknowledges it was not always perfect and got things wrong in the past. Sydney Morning Herald's investigative reporter Eryk Bagshaw has been leading this investigation. He joins us now. Eryk, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
Morning, Fauzi.
Look, let's put aside all the salacious details of this story. How did the story come about? How did you stumble on it?
Well, I think it's one of those stories that we'd always assumed or someone had whispered about the darker side of hospitality. Certainly amongst my friends, contacts that you know, there had always been an assumption that people might do drugs, people have sex in bars. All those things aren't surprising because after all, they've been doing that for thousands of years. But what sort of made this story different was not the allegations of drug use or sex. It was the response by the company. And Swillhouse came up time and time again. The reality is that there had been concerns within the hospitality industry about Swillhouse and a couple of other groups that have been bubbling away. Accounts on social media, particularly on Instagram, raising concerns about how it was operating towards the start of this year. So we decided to really devote some resources to it. It took 3 or 4 months at least of investigating and speaking to sources, finding the documents, making sure we were on legally solid ground and gaining the trust of victims to be able to tell their story. And that's what we've seen this week.
Now, most of the sources initially wanted to remain anonymous, for fear of losing their jobs or reputation, which is understandable. Some, though, are now coming forward and publicly putting their names to these claims as well. Are we about to see perhaps a groundswell of strength in numbers and perhaps more people in the hospitality industry coming out to out their own employers?
The response since we published this story is staggering. It has been a torrent of allegations and revelations about hospitality groups, not just Swillhouse. This industry is facing a reckoning. The number of particularly young women who have claimed that their employer has failed to support them is remarkable. And I think that for too long, many of these employers, most of these companies, which are mostly run by older men, have ignored younger women who start working for them, whether it's during university, after university, or just as their first jobs, are put into environments where drugs, alcohol, and sex are the norm and are expected to do their job. And this was just the accepted way of operating for so long. And I think, as we've seen with other industries, including the media, that's not the way things should go on. And I think right now we're seeing a bit of a dam wall break on this issue. And yes, I'd be expecting more stories to come over the coming weeks.
You know, the hospitality industry, of course, we know is very competitive. It's very cutthroat. And as you say, it is very much male dominated. Is this the reckoning that the industry is facing now and things will change?
Well, that's up to the industry and the operators. I mean, I think Swillhouse would say to you that they have changed, that they've put processes in place, that they've employed HR advisors, that they've got sexual harassment training. And all that might be true, but they didn't do it until at least 2019 when they already had multiple venues, hundreds of employees, millions of dollars in revenue. I think the same is the case of other groups as well, that what tends to happen is that they become successful, often quite young, expand the number of venues, expand the number of staff, are convinced that the product they're producing is great, but don't bother to employ the protocols that are necessary when you're running a large business. And then when people raise claims, they try and shuffle them out of the company or try and silence them. And I think that's really what's happened with Swillhouse. It's not the actual allegations, that if they were handled correctly at the time, we would not be writing this story. It's the way that the company responds after the fact. And time again, that response is what is damning of these groups. And I think, yes, it is up to the industry now to in many ways, clean up its act. And the positive sign is that there are many people who believe that they can do that, who are leaders within the industry, particularly female hospitality leaders who want to make a change. And I think now is the time for that to happen.
Well, Eryk Bagshaw, thank you for joining us on Weekend Breakfast. It's a fascinating report, and thank you for shining a light on the industry.
Great to be with you.